inconvenience. Welcome to Knowledgians. On today's program, we invite Bulu Imam to present his views on the topic intellectual satyagraha in the footsteps of Gandhi. Intellectual satyagraha, as he sees, is the exercise of moral truth based upon human instinct. It is it is the instinct that alerts us to right action irrespective of what anyone might say. For example, everyone is aware what a sin, uh, what what a sin the environmental destruction or pornography are, and their consequences. But to accept this publicly requires a certain moral courage, and this is intellectual satyagraha. Intellectual satyagraha is one of his experiment in the science of satyagraha, which is the fight of struggle after the ideal of truth, and it is the unerring guide to the truth and way to find it. This truth, which Gandhi calls God, is the every human being in the form of instinctive knowledge of good and evil. So he will talk about more about what instinct mean, what is intellectual satyagraha, and we will get to know about the amalgamation of instinct, intuition, intellect, and interestingly, all these three words has in it, so the quality is inborn, be it instinct, intuition, or intellect. So uh, I would like to invite Bulu Imam with my own, like a quote of Gandhi and my own poetry, that I will not let anyone walk through my mind with their dirty feet. महात्मा गांधी. मेरी संकल्प मात्र एक व्यक्तित्व से अपने कि बाहर की सफाई और अंतर्मन की स्वच्छता दोनों जरूरी है इंसान के लिए. वर्जित है कोई जो मैले विचार से धमा चौकड़ी करे मेरे ध्यान के लिए. With this quote and this small poetry, I invite Bulu Imam to express his views on intellectual satyagraha. So from here onwards, let's hear to Bulu Imam. Thank you. Bulu uncle, now you can take it from here.
Right. Jain. Thank you, Ranjit. And special thanks to all my viewers for tuning in, for some at a very early hour in the morning. My personal search in life has been for truth. And as everyone knows, it was crowned with the Gandhi Peace Award in 2011. So I can say that I am a Gandhian, maybe an unconventional one, but a Gandhian. The most important subject we have taken up today is intellectual satyagraha. And to put the matter into context, I wrote my papers and my thought long before I had heard it in print. And when I was reading my grandfather's presidential address to the Indian National Congress in 1918, I saw that he used the word intellectual satyagraha. And thereafter in my library searches, I found Gandhi used the term in 1924. I have always tried to understand what I meant by it, because in 78 I gave a series of talks in Udine in Italy at the Vicino Lontano conference on the same subject. And we had some meetings in Roma, and we talked about intellectual satyagraha and why these words intellectual and satyagraha in themselves are self-explanatory. I had to understand what was the deeper meaning of intellectual satyagraha. And ever since Ranjit invited me for this talk a month and a half ago, I have been turning my mind towards it in my readings. And I have formulated some new ideas in the course of this 1.5 months. And one of them, I hope you are able to see me. And one of them is that knowledge as we understand it today as the guidepost of human endeavor is a very false, should we say, guide. Because knowledge, by its very status, is conditional. You condition a child to a certain form of knowledge, and it will think that is right. You condition it to another form of knowledge, it will think that is right. And I believe this was the basis and the premise in our capitalist society for the United Nations making what they called a new social order. We are today living in a world with a new social order. And this is formulated and promulgated by the leading nations of the world, led by the United Nations, I believe, to a wrong destiny. The conquest of the earth is not the discovery of the self. And it is the discovery of the self which is the conquest of what it is to be a human being, and what is going to lead us to the future, whether on the planet or beyond it. So, with these deep thoughts, I think we shall begin our little talk. And I invite Ranjit to, from time to time, give me triggers which might lead us into a little, should we say, dialectical exercise. The first and most important point is that I start off on the premise that knowledge is not our guide. Now, if knowledge and what we know is not our guide, then what other guide can there be? When we look at the natural world, and I have had the opportunity to study uh, tribal life in great detail, especially its ethnobotany and its religious customs and religio-cultural ways of living. And I have found, for example, sometimes when a dog gets sick and it searches for medicine, it may not know the exact plant, but it finds it through trial and error. That's one way of finding out the truth. There is another way, which I believe animals have also, domesticated animals have imbibed this power from their long contact with human beings, especially dogs. And this power is instinct. We have already, I think, Ranjit drew attention to instinct in the opening remarks. Intellectual Satyagraha is based on the principle of instinct or conscience as the guiding principle of human life, so that it gives the man the judgment of moral action. If his conscience says something is wrong, then he should not do it. And this has got nothing to do with the knowledge system which has been imparted to him at school or university. It is not the knowledge system necessarily that he was taught by his parents. It is something which is coming from a deeper reservoir. And it is this deeper reservoir to which I want us to turn our attention to today as a new path in our search in a world which is very fast losing touch with the reality of experience. Gandhi understood the power of instinct in guiding people to realize what was the truth when India was ruled by an imperialist power. And it was this moral force and authority which gave him the power to speak to the masses of India and begin the freedom struggle against the British. The British understood this moral force, which Gandhi stood for, and the masses also understood. And I believe it was this moral force which largely is responsible for our freedom from British rule. Now, if it could, in so recent a time, have proved itself with such force, I believe that it is an instrument of great power, and if it is used intellectually, it comes as the basis of intellectual Satyagraha, because Satyagraha itself means battle for truth, or war for truth. Satyagraha, a war for truth. Now, you can't have a war unless you know what the war is about. And if you know the war is about conscious, uh, instinctive certainty of what is right or wrong, which knowledge is not adequate for. Because as I said, knowledge is conditional. We require an unconditional source of certainty of what is right or wrong. And I believe that this has been found in the instinct. A dog, a man, even a cat will know what is right or wrong. If it is stolen food, it will be guilty. If it has hurt something, it will show remorse. So this is the power which I think is required in the journey for the new destiny of mankind. It's not a new discovery, it's a very old discovery. But it is something that we are being reminded about today in this talk, that this is the founding, in my thought, this is the founding principle for intellectual satyagraha, because there cannot be a satyagraha without knowing what it is for. And we know it is a fight for the truth of a certainty which is beyond a conditional realm like knowledge. So I have debunked the idea that knowledge itself is all powerful. Unfortunately, our entire media, our entire educational system, our entire thought today is based upon knowledge. As they say, knowledge is power. I say the knowledge is delusion. Because what knowledge? Whose knowledge? Who credited the knowledge? So we have to be very careful that the knowledge which is handed to us is the real knowledge, the universal knowledge, the instinctive knowledge, knowledge which is fit to be called, as Gandhi said, God. It is the Parama Atma. It is the ultimate power. And we cannot allow that power to be defined by statesman or politician or businessman. So our entire definition of truth has to change. It must not be based upon knowledge or conditional sources. It has to be based upon a higher moral and spiritual authority, and I can find nothing deeper than the conscience. So that is the premise upon which we start, and I think Ranjit brilliantly exposed it in the introduction by giving the little talk. I can't hear you,
Yeah,
Ranjit.
yeah. Bulu uncle,
Yes.
I want to thank you to start this talk and reflect upon the idea of intellectual satyagraha. But having said that, I was more keen to know that okay, like truth can be many, like there can be my own subjective truth, your own subjective truth, and there can be the truth, right? The truth. So when we go on to expose into, or we when we go into the realm of intellectual satyagraha, how do we how do we reach to the truth for the journey inward, then rather than the journey outward? Because all the knowledge that we gain through the structured educational system points out to go outward and explore the world. How can we uh, realize the potential of this intuitive, instinctive side of ours in general? Any reflection on this one?
Well, before Swami Vivekananda became Swami Vivekananda, he was Naren. He was a young boy living in Calcutta.
Yes.
And when he went to Paramahamsa Ramakrishna and didn't know who he was, and Ramakrishna, of course, must have known who Naren was, Ramakrishna Swami asked him, "Have you seen God?" And Swami Vivekananda said, spontaneously, without thinking. It's recorded by M in the autobiography and the biography of Ramakrishna. He said, "Yes, as I have seen you." So simply, as I have
Yes,
seen
sir.
you.
Yes.
Uh, I mean, as I see you. So from this, I personally, can draw the conclusion that he must have had a very spontaneous realization of what he meant in his answer to Paramahamsa Ramakrishna. That yes, I have seen God like I'm seeing you. So, he must. I don't believe in great realizations. I believe in a great awakening. Maybe you may call it a realization. It's not a great spiritual. It's not like a nuclear explosion.
Yes.
A great realization is just seeing a fundamental truth and accepting. It's not something which is so explosive as a nuclear explosion. So when we are talking of something which is so simple, so ordinary, you know, like a child's love for the mother or the mother's love for the child is so instinctive and so impulsive and so unconditional and so simple, that is just there is no higher truth than that. So when we talk of this idea of people coming to make a definition for what is the ultimate, then thousands of books with millions of words have been written about trying to find something which cannot be described. Now, I believe all those millions of words and thousands of books are largely a waste of time because they're meant for intellectuals only. They are not meant for people searching realization. Realization is when you suddenly are hit with something which is the truth. So Narayan had seen the truth, obviously. He knew what was right and he knew what was wrong and he followed it. And I can only feel, I mean, in this distance of time, that Paramahamsa Ramakrishna was destined to find out whether this new disciple of his had come to that conclusion that he could instinctively say, I have seen God. I have seen the realization. And what he was saying was not that I have seen a great apparition in the sky, or I have read a great Cartesian thinker give an expounding lecture, or not even the great discoveries like Einstein made, which are contradicted again and again, and quantum theories and stuff like that. There were no high blown or high flung thoughts like that. It was just a simple realization: I've seen God. Finished. Adamagya. I have seen Him. Now, that sort of realization comes like if a man is in a crowd and he sees his child, he says, Beta. It's as simple as that. Or say, after half a lifetime, if a man has lost his mother and he suddenly finds her in a crowd, he says, Ma. So, what I'm talking about is that sort of instinctive recognition. Let's use the word recognition.
Yes.
That sort of recognition comes with instinct.
Yes.
I'm not going back to the frosts. There are two roads diverged in a yellowed wood, and I took the one less traveled by. I'm not
Mm.
saying that.
Yes.
But what I am saying is that in your life or in your experiences, as you must have yourself found, that sometimes you take the right path and sometimes you take the wrong path. You don't know why you do it, but whoever has taken the right path ends up happier, and those who have taken the wrong path end up sadder. It's not a question of a higher soul or a lower soul, or a higher path or a lower path. It's either a right path or a wrong path. It's as simple as that. It's not conditional. It's not based upon any religious ideology. It's not based upon any social conditioning. So what I'm trying to say is that instinct is the thing that tells you do this or don't do that. I mean, to take it to its, should you say, logical premise, people would say that when a nuclear reactor bursts like the one happened in Russia, the man pressed the wrong button at the last instant. Was that a mistake of instinct? I would say it has nothing to do with instinct. He was not working on instinct. He was working on mechanical uh, idea of do this or do that, and he did the wrong thing. But with instinct, what I believe is that there's no such thing as a wrong thing. There is no such thing as pressing the wrong button, because instinct by its own definition is unconditional. It happens without a cause or a reason, and the effect is what proves that the cause was correct. So we can continue.
Yeah, well said, Bulu uncle. I totally agree with you that it's kind of the recognition that comes from within. instinctively. Having said that and also learned from your reflection, I would like to know about how your journey till now has been on the footsteps of Gandhi from your childhood till now, and be it exploring the tribal side or say ethnobotany, or how do you see the disciplinary boundaries merging in your exploration of truth? Like
Well,
when
it
I
was
met
like this, you know. Yeah, sorry, continue.
when I met you, I remember vaguely that I met three times in when I was in Hazaribagh with you, and there are many more times that I went there, but due to some reason I wasn't able to interact with you. The first time we met was uh, 20 years back. Maybe we were trying to do an interview with you through some local channel, some Jain, I don't remember exactly, but unfortunately they didn't pass on the videos and other thing, and it got in vain. But at that time we were more keen on the tribal art side and kohver and paintings, and how they are related to a larger perspective of tribal living. Then on the second time I meet, I remember that I went with a photojournalist to your place. His name is Girendra Mohan Mishra, and he came to our house and he wanted to interview you. And you talked at that time about a very different approach. It was like you were looking. I cannot say the exact word, but you were trying to look onto the migration of the people around the world through dogs, and you were using some kind of a DNA fingerprinting from dog tails. And as a biotechnology, I feel very biotechnologist. I felt very much like interested, because being from a background which is more social, which is more on the ethnobotanical side, or maybe on the art and aesthetics, how come you are using different tools and techniques to solve a problem? So I see the disciplinary boundaries merging in your exploration of the truth. So, and the third time I met, I remember in 2011, before you got this Gandhi Prize, uh, um, uh, we were talking more or less on the topic that we are talking today, intellectual Satyagraha. So I just want to know through your life and journey that how Gandhian thoughts and this merging of different discipline and instinctive approaches has have led you uh, to the place that you are today.
Well, thank you for drawing attention to my research with dogs, which was done with the University of California. And you'll be very happy to know that I was always trying to find the origin of the Indian dog in the villages, and tracing it to a source other than the European wolf. And we had several conferences on the subject, and we formed organizations in America and Australia. And the University of California sampled several hundred DNA samples of our indigenous village dogs. And during one of the it was taken to the Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm, where Dr. Peter Sovlenin said that it was an Indo-Pacific breed. But at the last conference we had at the Black Sea about 8 years ago, the Chinese delegation took it back to Beijing, and they ran our samples from UCLA through the DNA, and they found that it was actually a DNA belonging to the Chinese wolf, south of the Yangtze River. And so it's now known as the, the Santal hound, at least this dog of the Santal people, is known as ASY, Asia South of Yangtze. Now, the point here is connected with something which I've just written over here, that it is a common, the instinct is a common denominator of the human race. It is what identifies man and the higher animals, especially those domesticated by man, especially dogs. Elsewhere, I've written that you can understand the evolutionary migrations of humans through the study of the DNA of dogs. Now,
Right.
why I bring dogs into this? because dogs are among the higher mammals in my experience, and very closely associated with man. And the things that man instinctively likes or dislikes or fears or loves are transmitted to dogs. So dogs are a very good denominator of what human beings feel with instinct. Thank you for drawing attention to this. And we will go back to it again, but I'll let you continue for the moment.
Yeah, so then I wanted to know more about your work throughout your life that we are not aware of. Maybe अगर हिंदी में कहें तो ऐसे कर सकते हैं कि हजारीबाग तो आपको जानता है, नहीं हजारीबाग आपको नहीं जानता है, आप हजारीबाग के चप्पे चप्पे को जानते हैं।
Correct, correct, correct. Yes.
तो तो उस पे अगर हम थोड़ा रिफ्लेक्ट करें कि कैसे कैसे आपका कार्य रहा, चाहे वो डिस्प्लेसमेंट को लेकर रहा ट्राइबल पीपल्स के माइनिंग के कारण, या डिस्ट्रक्शन ऑफ कॉरिडोर्स फॉर मूवमेंट ऑफ एलिफेंट एंड टाइगर्स, वो प्रोजेक्ट रहा, या डिफरेंट प्रोजेक्ट जो आपने लाइफ में किया, डिफरेंट एस्पेक्ट्स नेचर के जो आपने एक्सप्लोर किए। कैन यू
Yes,
रिफ्लेक्ट अ
yes.
लिटिल बिट, मतलब हम हमें वो
Certainly.
रोलर कोस्टर राइड पे ले चलिए,
I think,
जहां हम आपके साथ वो सारे जर्नी को देख पाए जिसके थ्रू आप गए थे, फ्रॉम अ
say,
हंटर टू अ इन्वायरमेंटलिस्ट, वो
yeah.
वाला, वो जर्नी को आप
Well,
थोड़ा डिस्क्राइब कीजिए।
since I worked many years on elephant control in India and I shot a lot of rogue elephants, I did have experience with elephants, and I was studying the wildlife elephant corridors between Hazaribagh and Palamo. And the route came through the North Karanpura Valley, which in the 1980s was being mined for the coal mining. And so that when I wanted to stop the coal mining because of the carbon deposits and the carbon atmospheric destruction, so I used the elephant migratory corridors. Later, I used tiger corridors for regeneration of tiger population being disturbed by mining. Uh, I used Peter Savlanen's research um, for that. So, as you rightly say, I've used many different things as a part of my environmental struggle. And I remember one day when I was in the Pipavav coal mine in 1984, I met an Australian engineer who told me about the connection between the Indian dogs and the Australian dingoes. And that led to my continuing research on Indian dogs as a progenitor of the Australian dingo. And that further was linked with my research in the rock art. In 1990, I discovered a lot of rock art sites in Jharkhand. And well, today the number is 20 sites. But in those days, I had about 10 or 12 sites. And the rock art was found to be very similar to the rock art of Australia. And I later found that the rock art all around the world is very similar. And one of the important things was that they had used rock art sites in environmental activism in Australia. So I decided to use environmental activism with rock art in India, and I linked to it the study of wildlife corridors, especially of elephants, which the Wildlife Trust of India went on. My son Justin did the first studies along with me, and Edward Goldsmith helped us with the UK Environment Trust. And later that went into human rights, and then it developed into the Kova and the Sorai Tribal Art Project, and it went around the world as an environmental movement and at the same time an art movement. And so, as you can see, when I talk about the out of Australia theory, which I began and which is still a subject of Radio Australia lectures I give, that there is a connection all over between people, between environments, between social and cultural evolution, and how it can be linked to the living societies that are with us today to be able to prove their indigenous rights or human rights. Subhashish Das has been working on megaliths in Hazaribagh, as you know. I think he's one of your lecturers in the forthcoming lectures. And Subhashish went on to study megaliths. So I think there's an unbounded field of research. And again, I use the word instinct over here because the man who reminded us of that was Albert Einstein. Einstein himself said that the theory of relativity was discovered by instinct and not by mathematics. This was Albert Einstein's own statement. So, what I'm trying to tell you is instinct is not just something to discern right from wrong, but it is also to find what is not known through knowledge. We might be able to find things that we cannot scientifically prove even through a PhD thesis, but which we can prove by giving evidence of it archaeologically or paleoarchaeology. So I turned from biological studies to paleoarchaeological studies, and then the whole thing blossomed into a huge international campaign, probably the biggest ever in India, and that is what brought about the Gandhi Award. And the Padma Shri is just, I should say, an epitaph.
Uh, Thank you, Bulu uncle, for reflecting on the journey that you have taken till now. What I find interesting is that you have also worked a lot. When I interacted with you long back, you told me that you know that the tribals of Jharkhand and tribals elsewhere, they have their own system of treating and like they have their own system of believing on nature as a source of health, and they don't want to go into the hospitals and places like that. Can you reflect a little bit on the aspect of ethnobotany and what do you find different in different tribal communities? Because I think you have documented it very well at some point of time.
Yes, my Birors of Hazaribagh, which is available on Amazon, that is a part of my ethnobotanic studies. I was with the Birhors for 2 decades studying ethnobotany, and my Mati lady Kamli, she taught me so much about ethnobotany and Titingaburi, and oh, there were so many, all Burhan, and they taught me all I know maybe. And I did see, um, similarity, say, between a sickness and a root is one thing. Um, to find a medicine which an animal is using and apply it to human being is another. A root that looks like a gait will be used for arthritis, or one
Yes.
that is look like a snake may be used for antivenom.
Yeah.
So these are some of the things, but what I'm trying to get to is a deeper understanding. Uh, Ethnobotany, actually, you are a biological person. I mean, that's your field. So you will appreciate it better that all the great discoveries in DNA and stuff like that enter into terribly complex worlds. I think we made the world terribly complex. Now, I'm trying to take a little inspiration out of what you said. Um, you're forcing me to try and find something, and maybe I haven't got it even up to now, but I think I'll make a statement that um, the reality of a substance for, say, treatment is hidden from us till we have, like Crick and Watson or somebody, we have broken down
Yes.
something into a formula. But let us say that we, through some instinct, I'm going back to the word instinct,
Yes.
through some instinct, we become aware that it is of use. It may be trial and error, but I would use the word instinct. And if it works, then generations of people can benefit from it.
Yes.
Now, when hundreds of millions of people over hundreds of thousands of years have been living on a planet and dealing with the biological properties of plants and animal bones and tissues and minerals, obviously, by trial and error, they will discover certain things. Now, how the trial and error happened is hidden from us. But what we do know is that sometimes you get an idea that this is beneficial. Even in medicine, if we understand the ethnobotany of folk ethnobotany in India, we will find that the the medicines are very simple. I mean, a papaya, for example, or some aromatic root, and or maybe some oil or something, and that's coming down from such a long period that you may not know the exact sources. It may require a lot of research, but I would like to feel, from my experience, that those things have become a part of the hereditary memory of the people or the tribe, but that their original discoveries could be by accident. But I would rather believe that there was some reason behind the accident. And so I'm going back to this idea of some instinctive impulsion that made a person try this particular. So I'm still holding on to my argument of instinct,
Yes.
even
Yeah.
in ethnobotany,
Yeah.
that I feel like it is with science,
Mm.
ethnobotany or science, that instinct itself can be the guidepost to a discovery which cannot be had in any other way.
Uh, Thank you, Bulu Uncle. Now, taking from science to the realm of art, uh, like over the years we have seen, and now if we step into Hazaribagh, one thing that we see is that everywhere on the wall we see these beautiful paintings and tribal arts being conveyed nicely, uh, be it when you go to Hazaribagh railway station or in Ranchi and places elsewhere, also globally, that some of your art which has a tribal origin is now well received, but at one point of time it wasn't that common. How did you navigate um, this lesser known art to the world map, and how did you take it so that it got recognized globally, as well as now everyone in Hazaribagh is still at least aware of this form of art?
Well, only last evening, Auntie gave me a cardboard tube which held a bottle of 100 pipers in it. And I said, now we have really arrived, because we had a Sorai painting on a cardboard bottle for 100 pipers whiskey. So I said, now we've really arrived. Well, another very interesting thing is that Gustav and my wife Philomena and my daughter Yvonne and my artist Putli completed a 1200-foot mural at the Abadakone Art Expo in Ottawa in October last year, which runs to 1200 square feet. It's probably the largest painted tribal mural in the world. And it's on permanent display now at the Art Gallery of, at the National Gallery of Canada in Ottawa. Now, that sort of thing is spectacular, and the fact that our art finds a place in the permanent collection of the Art Gallery of New South Wales in Sydney, and we are in permanent collections of many major museums around the world. And we hang in 1,000 homes in Europe. So, I mean, your question is right. How did we take it there? Starting off with absolutely nothing, how did we manage to make it into an extravaganza which was celebrated by the world? We hope to have an exhibition soon in bigger places like the Met or the Museum of Man in Paris, I'm dreaming of. But we've had 70 exhibitions around the world, and at least half of those are in the major art galleries or museums of all the countries. So, I mean, you name it, we've done it. So that's a very good question, and it's a difficult one to answer. But as I said, it was done using my old gut feeling, principle of working by instinct. If I think this is the right thing to do, I try it, and if I think that's going to be better, I try that. So, well, I give you an idea of how instincts are international. I wanted to bring Kova painting onto the wallpaper map, and so I wrote to a Chinese wallpaper company, and I said, "Can you help me?" So the first thing they wrote back to me and said is, "How much are you willing to invest?" Now, I didn't have $1 million to invest in wallpaper, but within the week, I got a letter from a very well-known home furnishing company in New York, La Viva Home, And the proprietor, Laura Oviva, wrote to me and said, Mr. Imam, would you like to make wallpaper? I said, oh, this is very interesting. I said, I've just been trying to sell the idea in China, and now you're writing to me from New York. How do you know about it? She said, well, you see, there's this black and white magazine, avant-garde magazine, published in London and New York simultaneously, and they have an issue of 12 pages of your art. Oh, I said, that's very wonderful. So the art was seen by a person who's into home furnishing, and she then immediately contacted the source, which is me, and then she designed it in California, and we are selling a fair amount in spas and hotels and private apartments throughout America now. So that funds our tribal art project with a little money, because I made a tribal women artists cooperative out of the whole art project. And we started with 30 women, and now the government has taken it over and they made it into a GIS, Geological Index Survey project.
Yes.
And believe it or not, we've got several hundred women working on the tag.
Mm.
And they can be contacted from anywhere in the world because GIS is on the world map. So,
Yes.
as you rightly say, I mean, from wallpaper to GIS mapping to making big international murals, you name it, we've done it. Yes, in fact, I wanted to get our aeroplanes also painted like they did in Australia
Great. Great.
in the Balaringi project. I
Yeah.
thought Air India should have a Sorai painting, you know.
Yeah.
So, no dream is too big.
Yes.
And it's all been by gut. It's
Yeah.
all been by gut,
Yeah.
instinct. So I'm familiar with instinct, and I've used it in my work and life. And a very positive thing. Instinct is a very positive thing. If you get a good vibe, go for it.
Yes.
And there's nothing better in the world than success.
Yeah, but I think that that success has not come overnight. It has been,
No, it's not.
oh, oh.
It's come over a lot of backbreaking work and empty stomachs and
Yes, yes,
disillusion things. And I discovered an artist by the name of Putli, for example, in 1993. I was at ISCO at the first rock art I discovered. And we were walking through the forest, and I told my daughter, I said, have you seen that bird over there? It's 5 feet high. And she said, no, that's not a bird, that's a painting. So I said, really? And I looked carefully, and later I found it was the Bengal florican. Now, the Bengal florican was extinct in India a century ago. So it with the long tassel on the head. And I said, but God, you don't get Bengal floricans 5 feet high. And then I said, let's go and take a look. And we went and found this little girl of 14 was painting her marriage kova. Well, the end of the story is that we documented the art. I took it to the Australian High Commission, which is directly involved with the mining in the North Karanpura Valley. And I told them I would like a project for this art, which was the beginning of the Sorai and Kova painting. And they funded my first project for $10,000. Not a lot of money, but in those days it was enough to start a project which has gone around the world several times. And so I got the sympathy of the Australian government, in fact, with our tribal art project. And they invited us to the Art Gallery of New South Wales and the Australian Museum to paint in Australia. Many, many years, many exhibitions. So that all started off with discovering a painting on a wall in a forest, which turned out to be the Sorai painting, which got funding from the Australian government, which was actually involved with the funding of the coal mining of the open cast coal mines of Pepperwa. And that led to my research with the out of Australia theory with the dogs. So you see how it all comes together.
yes.
You have a beautiful thing, it always comes together.
So a little bit related to this. Why there is a lack of, I would not call sympathy, that you told a minute ago that the Australian government were sympathetic towards the work that you were doing, and they help you run the project. But why is there a lack of empathy, not sympathy?
I know what you're going to say.
Yeah, empathy among the like the authorities, local authorities, or say uh, the government. Uh, uh, why is there a lack of this feeling of protecting our own roots uh, in ourselves?
It's a very simple thing, Ranjit. I think it's a psychological complex in the Indian. Uh, I have not been disliked. I've always been lauded. That's all right. But every discovery I made, from the art to the discovery of the Buddhist site of it, Khori, or the rock paintings, or you name it, all the things I've done, I have been pointedly disregarded by the authorities, and I've become an object of venom for many of the people who think that because I was an activist in coal mining, that I'm an enemy to the nation. And everybody was highly surprised when the government gave me the Padma Shri. In fact, I was even called a BJP Padma Shri. Yeah, so that's a very funny thing. But the thing I'm trying to say is that even now, I've got this beautiful big museum I've made, and the university is so jealous about me that they wanted to take it away from me. And the vice chancellor actually did, in a public statement, say, if he doesn't give the museum, we'll take it. And I thought to myself, this is quite an unnecessary statement, because nobody is going to take it away from me. But there is this sort of a jealousy with all the work that I've done within the, should we say, the establishment. And I really can't understand it, because I'm born and brought up in India, and all my work has been for India, and I'm very well known across the world for the work I've done in India. So I'm at a loss to know why there's this psychosocial trauma in the establishment against whatever. I'm glad you brought up the point in public.
Yeah, taking it from there once again, I want to, because we are all part of a structured education system. Maybe you are not, you are
No, I'm not.
instinctive. So
Yeah,
I just want to know that what stops the government to, or what steps stops the authorities, or the, let's say, if we translate intellectual, it will be buddhijeevi in Hindi.
yeah,
Buddhijeevi means those who are just like, I would say that more like living on their intellect, just getting
right.
money for their intellect. I I I see you differently from Buddhijeevi. I see you as a Buddhi Sevi, because you have the Buddhi and you have done great work in the society. So you have done a service to the society by bringing the lesser known facts to the public domain. Let's say
Yes,
it like, be it art, be it other forms. So taking it from there, why till now there is no like, I know that megalith is now in the syllabus, but why we don't talk about ethnobotany that much? Why we don't talk about in syllabus and structured education system? Why we don't talk about the tribal art and these stuff? How can we be more empathetic, and how can this be integrated into a system that we are more connected to our roots that we inherit? That's a question from my side, or maybe a reflection.
well, it's a very good question, and there's something which is psychologically wrong about the whole thing. That when you can use this for development of knowledge about, as you said, ethnobotany, which I tried very hard, but nobody bought my book on ethnobotany. I doubt if it's in the university. They have no course for it. Uh, all my tribal research studies, which is very vast and now coming under my own publishing group. So the universities never showed an interest. And I did get promises from IGRM, from IGNCA. They didn't do anything for me. They took the manuscripts, they never did anything. My Antiquarian Remains of Jharkhand, of course, was published by Intact, and I must thank Intact, Indian National Trust, for Art and Cultural Heritage, for which I've been convener for 30 years in Jharkhand, in Hazaribagh. And I have to thank Intact, and especially General Gupta, the chairman of Intact, who had that book published. I still have, I mean, at least a copy of it in my library. And I have to thank 40 major monographs awaiting publication. And I believe it would be a gift to knowledge nation. But nobody takes an interest in my work. And I'm so grateful that you even put me on the platform of an interview. But I think that great thinkers are generally either controversial or they are problematic. I am at a loss to inferiority complex within the establishment when they're up against scholarship of a very high level, which their own institutions are not able to provide. And the truth is, as you said, in the eating of the cake. I mean, we have been terribly successful in every way. And you would have thought that a successful person would be an icon in the establishment. But unfortunately, I'm a sore spot in the establishment and not an icon in the establishment. Maybe your lecture today and other lectures like this, there have been signal successes. I mean, the Gandhi Award given in the House of Lords was a success. The Padma Shri given last year by the President is a success. I mean, I can't say I haven't had successes, but when you study the amount of work which we have done, you would say that the successes are not adequate to the number of failures.
Yes. And I do think that no award will be uh, ever be a justification of the amount of the work that you have done.
Neither
So
did Gandhi get the
yeah,
Nobel Award.
it's yeah,
That's quite understood.
yeah. So it's more like a token. But whatever work you have done is more or less reflected in the way you have brought this to the public domain, especially the art and the form and the tribal perspective to it. All these things are like real treasure of Jharkhand, I would say, uh, which was brought to the world map at some point of time. Now, I would like to also ask you a little bit on a different aspect that uh, in the opening remark as we started, that the world is facing many problems and challenges, be it on the environmental side, be it on the economic side, be it on the social side. And we have always been waging war against everything: war against hunger, war against poverty, war against this, war against that. But all this war has not yielded any significant result or improvement. I, so what is lacking in our understanding, or what is lacking in the psyche, that doesn't help it become a mass movement, as like Gandhi, that, like you said, that at some part of history, it was that our instinctive self wanted to get independence, and that brought like as a mass movement. What is the like, what is the that key element that's missing, that we are not being empathetic? I don't think that we are protecting environment. Environment is protecting us. So in that way, how could we minimize the destructions, or say, how could we stop or slow down the process of this collective suicide that we are on?
I think the answer to your question was given by Naomi Klein in her book, This Changes Everything. She has written a mega bestseller by the name of This Changes Everything by Naomi Klein, a Canadian. And she has put down the cause to all the problems in the world today to capitalism. Now, I have written a very interesting paper which is called The Demystification of the Wealth of Nations. I was reading an old book by Lecky on the history of Britain, in which I discovered his analysis of the wealth of nations. In the 18th century, when Adam Smith brought to light his book, The Wealth of Nations, everybody doesn't know that he had done a book on sympathy before he did the book on Wealth of Nations. Sympathy was based upon the moral principle of the deprivation of people and the need to restore um, fundamental and human rights to people. And after that, after a lot of research, maybe after a decade, he wrote The Wealth of Nations. Now, The Wealth of Nations is simply the exploitation of the human weakness of greed, of wanting more than we need. Exactly the opposite of what Mahatma Gandhi said. The world has enough for every man's need, but not enough for every man's greed. So, The Wealth of Nations is a theory by a man. In fact, there's a very good book called Adam Smith's Mistake, how a moral philosopher uh, invented capitalism and destroyed morality. So that's a book worth reading. I have it. It's an excellent book. Adam Smith's Mistake. Well, in Adam Smith's Mistake, the author has very clearly shown us how we went on the wrong path in the 18th century and followed the capitalism, which was at the opportune moment of the colonial enterprise. The colonial enterprise was being able to get the material, and Britain and the Scottish um, research was able to provide the infrastructure to process it into locomotives and railway lines. America came at the correct moment also. Whatever happened in France with the government, or in England with the government with James, and we had the Pilgrim Fathers, and we had, the American continent coming alive, and the vast areas which required industrial expansion. Then that went on into the form of wars and genocide, which were exploited for economic gain, as we later have seen. I mean, whether it's in Baghdad or whether it's anywhere else in the world, wars have become a source of economic benefit. So we suddenly moved with the Wealth of Nations uh, into a new scenario. Adam Smith changed the world. He changed the world from an old order to a new order, perhaps even more so than the Industrial Revolution, because he was the architect of what made the Industrial Revolution. It was industrial capitalism. And industrial capitalism today is the reason why America is teetering at the edge of insolvency. And it is an answer, in a way, I believe, to your question.
Yeah, well said and beautifully put to the audience. I really admire the view, and I also believe that that might be one reason. But at the same time, the government always says that it's a pro-people government and pro.
No, nothing
Uh,
is pro people. Nothing
yes,
is pro people.
yes,
Government cannot function if it's pro people. Government has to be anti people in
yes.
order to survive. I don't think that
Great,
myth
great,
has
great
been
thought,
well
great thought,
understood about.
great thought. Uh,
Government is anti people.
yes.
Yeah, that's the
So,
bottom line. Probably that's why people don't like me. The truth always comes out.
yes. So, taking on to a more personal side, I remember being at your place several times. And one thing I know that you do every morning is that when you get up, you just write a, a page, uh, like your thoughts on a page.
Well, I've
And
done it this morning. I do it every morning.
yes, I know that. And I happened to read one of the pages, and I think
Oh, I've
those are
seen.
the, yes, you showed me at one point of time. We were
Yes,
there, and you said that these are the thoughts that were percolating into my mind this morning.
right, right,
So
right.
it's like a bundle of thoughts that you have had over the period of time, and I think it will be an excellent book at some point of time. But tell me
Now
about.
it won't be books. It has to be a library.
Yeah, before I introduce yourself, I do believe that many people do PhD, but you yourself is a subject of PhD because your the area and dimension, and I say it on this podium also, that having given a chance to do a PhD on your life and your moral and your exploration, I would be the first one to take it forward. So it will be
Well, it's
a.
always better to study a living subject than a dead one. So I
Exactly,
suggest you
exactly,
hurry up.
exactly. Yeah, great thought, great thought. So I have always believed like you as a kind of a people tree, because we have been there. Me and my brother. My brother is more associated to you than me, because during his school days he used to go to you, Suraj. And
Yes.
I have been going to you, maybe not that often, but whenever we went to your place, there was a kind of a feeling of oneness that we feel, being offered a cup of herbal tea first, and then you have to wait in the lawn for you to come out. And the moment you come out and you speak to the people, it's like I've seen none of your word is wasted on criticism or on other stuff that what other people are doing. You are more focused inward in your own self discovery and journey. Can you reflect a little bit on that, that how the youth of today can take inspiration, and no matter whatever the disciplinary field they are pursuing their study, how can they have a like a bird's eye view and a open I would say it like this, that the education system first comes and takes away our instinct and our intuition, and then they come up with a new subject that okay, now you be innovative. Now innovation is a big term in today's world, that be innovative, try to think innovative, try to solve a problem with a different way. So when you have taken it in the initial formative years, how come you expect people to regenerate that thing? So the general question now is that how can we uh, keep our instinctive, intuitive side alive with the intellect, so that the three function in sync: the intellect, intuition, and the instinct, and we become more kind of evolved, uh, say from Homo sapiens to say something like a Homo spiritualis, so that we are more empathetic toward our fellow being, and we understand the problem in a more wider perspective. Yes, your reflection.
Well, I mean, Homo sapiens is just a word, and
Yes,
I've read that lovely book which has been written by the Jew gentleman from Oxford, and I really don't know. I've read it twice. I tried to understand what he understood. Homo sapiens, you know the book I mean, the big new book. And I'm not too sure even young men like him know what they're talking about, because they're still going into it with a didactic approach. They're trying to get an answer through logic, and logic has been confounded by reason. So, in a world where reason has confounded logic, where can truth exist? I don't see there's much place for it to exist. The conditioned mentality of the academic world and the psychosocial trauma of the general populace, and you spoke about pornography in the beginning. And when I have grandchildren that are studying pornography instead of geography, it's rather difficult for me to try and tell them about, the testament of Jesus or the beauty of the Rig Veda or the marvelous work of the Ramayana or the Mahabharata. It's very difficult. I believe even in India, the Indian children, if they're going to study pornography instead of geography or sociology, I'm not too sure they're going to be able to understand the things which you are talking about, which are not in that realm, they're in another realm.
yes,
So what we have to have now maybe is a general deconditioning.
yeah,
We might have to get somebody like Adam Smith to invent some type of a washing machine into which we can put our children to brainwash them, to
yeah,
remove everything that they know today in order to go back to
yeah,
everything that the people in the villages know today, because
yeah,
they have not been conditioned, they have
yeah,
not yet been demoralized, they have not yet been psychologically traumatized.
yeah,
Uh, you know, our country, our world, our population is facing a trauma which has been maybe added to by people like Adam Smith and the Industrial Revolution, all the good things that had bad effects. I'm not calling them bad things. I don't call anything bad. I mean, otherwise they'd say I'm some sort of a spoil sport.
yeah,
But the point is that now, Ranjit, if you want to bring it back on even keel, I mean, how do you get all those hoodlums in New York to stop destroying all the show windows? And how do you get all the people of all the world to change their viewpoint, or get rid of white and black, or get rid of religious biases, or how do you do it? I don't see any way that you easily do it, you know.
yes,
It's like when you break a crystal mug, you may have a lot of pieces, but you won't have the mug. And that's what we are facing at the moment. We are facing a society like a shattered goblet, and we're trying to put it together is not really very possible. Much easier to make a new goblet.
yes,
And if I don't know, but as a person who studied the science of global warming for 2 decades seriously, I was a member of the 50 group in 350.org. And you know that global warming has been my pet subject for half a
yes,
century.
mm,
Now the only way is that we have to completely revamp the whole thing. And as I'm seeing, Corona has come at a time when it was least expected and has broken the foundations of normal society to the roots,
yes,
economically,
exactly,
sociologically,
mm,
psychologically, and spiritually. Corona has destroyed the confidence of the world.
yes,
And now, with global warming around the corner, and Greta Thunberg, God bless her, shouting about something that nobody wants to listen to because nobody can afford to listen to it. Even the American president cannot afford to listen to sense because he doesn't have the armaments with which to win it. The battle is too big because we've already done enough spade work to destroy a living metabolism. Society is a living metabolism.
exactly,
Once we destroy a living metabolism, it's not going to be easy to bring it back again. How long it took a little country like Germany to get back on its feet? It took a long time. They've come back. So did Japan. But the point is that if you do that to the whole world, and now globalization and the new social order of the United Nations have been so cumulatively successful that from the North Pole to the South Pole and the East to the West, we have got a traumatized society. And I don't see how this can be put back on the wheels. I don't see, unless we have a complete breakdown through Corona and through global warming and climate change, that there will have to be a reversal of society back to old values, old
yes,
principles, old foundations. I'm
yes,
not saying we should go backward in time, but I'm saying that we should stop this terrible destruction of the fabric of society, which is happening today. And I speak for that.
yes.
I think all
I
your listeners will be sympathetic to this particular point.
Yeah, I totally relate to what you say. I think there is a time which is apt now to deconstruct the society the way you think that.
Well, that is what happened in 1962 when Rachel Carson wrote Silent Spring. She
Yes, yes,
talked about the chemical pollution of the planet,
yes.
and the whole world listened to that little woman.
Yeah,
So, this is the time when
I
people will.
personally have read that book also, and it's an interesting tale of how far things can go wrong when you are not ready to accept the truth of the moment. And I think the truth of the moment now is what you say clearly, that we are all fragmented and broken, not only socially, economically, and spiritually, but on different realms. And to bring it up with in Rahiman says that Rahiman धागा प्रेम का मत तोड़ो चटकाए टूटे फिर ना जुड़े जुड़े गांठ पड़ जाए. So those गांठ will be always there. So it's better to create a new order that's
Much
more.
better to create a new order.
Yeah, instead of having this kind of gaunt everywhere and trying to knit it
Absolutely
together.
right. A new
Yeah,
order. We need a new order,
we need a new
a new
order.
social order, a new economic order,
Yes, a new economic order, a new social order is the need of the time. And I
based
feel,
upon morals, based
yeah,
upon morals.
yeah,
Whether you use instinct or not is another matter.
yes. And how like at this point of time, again, one small question. Actually, we are nearing to the end of the program, but I want to ask you, how do you define moral?
Well, again,
Say,
I go back to the word instinct.
yes, okay,
I go back to the word instinct.
yeah.
That which the instinct said is moral, and
Yeah.
that which it says is not moral is not.
So
And
it's
I use that as
yeah,
a final arbiter, even at the level of wildest tribes in primitive countries.
yes,
Say, a pygmy in the Belgian Congo, or an
yes,
aboriginal in the Australian desert,
mm,
or an Eskimo in the Arctic waste. I believe that any of those people knows what's right or wrong.
yeah,
Because I believe right and wrong is an international total thing inside us. Killing a spider is wrong. I believe that is in the instinct even of a cannibal. He will feel that Maya. That so intellectual satyagraha is the realization of these truths and the war to bring them into a public domain.
yes,
So you and I today are in intellectual satyagraha. This 1 hour that we have spent together with our listeners is a feat of intellectual satyagraha, because you have stirred a platform upon which everybody will bang their head, whether
yes,
disagree or agree, it doesn't
yeah,
matter.
yes,
But they will start talking and
yeah,
discussing and
yeah,
disagreeing. And that is the purpose of intellectual satyagraha, to
yeah,
create a debate and a discovery which will lead to the realization of truth. It is a war of truth. And in every war, there have to be hammers. This is a hammer.
yeah, exactly. Well said. Actually, through knowledge, we are always trying to bring the lesser known knowledge or the people who, because we cannot idealize, say, Amitabh Bachchan or someone who is far away. We have to idealize someone who is from the roots. I can relate
Precisely.
very well to you or to say Subhasis sir or someone who is close to me in Hazaribagh. And if he can do that, I can have a feeling that I can also do that and I can contribute
Precisely.
in my own little way. So, sitting here in
Precisely.
Sweden, this was my attempt to bring the things in the right perspective. As a conversation starter, you may say that I might
Right.
not be able to bring revolutionary changes, but yes, I am open to bring evolutionary changes by small steps that I can take by starting the conversation in the right direction at least.
That is intellectual satyagraha.
That is intellectual satyagraha, and
That is intellectual.
that's why this word has always lingered with me when I approached you to give a talk on this platform. I only
Because
had
you are
this.
an intellectual satyagrahi. You are an intellectual satyagrahi.
Thank you. And there are many like me and many like you
Must
who
be.
yeah, who want to be the catalyst in change, but they don't find the ways how to be one. And
This is the way. What you are doing, this is the way.
yes,
It will
uh,
bring a social consciousness across the world. It is doing it now,
yeah, and
and with a few,
one last question I would like to
certainly.
yeah, for you, that say that I am not talking about in like fragmented individuality. I think intellect is there, instinct is there, intuition is there, all is there in one human being. So how do you see which out of the three would stand out if you were to judge that okay, this should be the cardinal quality of a human being: instinct, intuition, intellect?
Hard question, because they're all three bound together.
Yes, yes, I know.
I mean, some people say that the brain is in the gray matter, and some say it's in some other matter. And some people say it's in the right half, and some people say it's in the left. So I wouldn't want to get into dialectics in this matter. I would just
Yes,
simply say that all three should be taken together.
yes,
There should be a synthesis of all three:
very
the
nice.
intellect, the instinct, and the intuition. Because as far as we are concerned, they are words that can only be defined by a dictionary, but which actually cannot be translated into human consciousness without experience. So
Yes, yes,
Nolarians is a very good term for knowledge and experience.
taken together,
So
yes,
this particular thing which we are talking about, intellect, instinct, and intuition,
yeah,
they can only function through direct experience.
yes,
When they are put into action, then they become experience. So the truth is in experiential mode. That is why they say realization has to be realized. Until
Yes.
you've realized it, is not a
Yes.
realization.
Yes. So it's very personal, it's very like individualistic. Nobody is going to take this journey for you. You have
No,
to
you have
find
to
your
take
own
it
way,
yourself. You
because
have
it's
to take it
experiential.
yourself.
Yes. With this nice thought, Bulu uncle, I would like to thank you once again to
Thank you
uh,
very
uh,
much, and
come
my
on this
greetings to all
platform.
your viewers. And I
Thank
thank everybody and say Jai Hind. Very
Jai
nice.
Hind.
Thank you, Ranjit, for a
Uh,
lovely
y-
evening.
yeah, but Bulu uncle, before we end the program, I would like to inform my viewers of the forthcoming event that we have lined up this month.
Certainly, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'll just share the slide once again.
I think it was excellent. It is a wonderful talk.
So I again, once again, end with the same quote with which I started, and I feel that you are a true epitome of that. That Gandhi says that I will not let anyone walk through my mind with their
Right,
dirty feet.
right.
मेरा संकल्प मात्र एक व्यक्तित्व से अपने
Mhm.
कि बाहर की
Gandhi said,
सफाई और अंतर्मन की
that is why
स्वच्छता,
they say take off the shoes at the door.
या दोनों
That is
जरूरी है
why they say,
इंसान के लिए। वर्जित है कोई जो मैले विचार से धमा चौकड़ी मचाए मेरे ध्यान के लिए। और मैं जानता
that is
हूँ,
why
यस, दैट्स,
we take off our shoes entering into a holy place.
यस, एंड it applies same to our mind too,
It
that we,
applies very much to our minds.
yes. So that was all about the today's talk on intellectual satyagraha.
Thank you very much, Ranjit, for a wonderful talk.
Yeah, and next we have Subhasis Das. He's an
I
independent
look
researcher.
forward to it.
Yeah, and he is also explorer of megalith, a very good friend of Bulu uncle, I think, because they
Yes,
work.
yes, definitely.
Yeah, they work on the same kind of lines of connecting to the roots. And he will be talking on Jharkhand ke Mahapashan. It will be a kind of a bilingual talk. And then we have another uh, person. This is next week, and next to next week we have a actor actually. His name is Mukesh Ram Prajapati, and he will talk about something like जीवन के रणभूमि को रंगमंच बनाने की कला पे वो बात करेंगे, that
Very nice.
transitioning from a battlefield to a stage, as Shakespeare says. So life is a stage. So it will be an interesting talk with Mukesh Ram Prajapati and his own struggle from being a physically handicapped to becoming an actor. That too from having his roots in Hazaribagh. So with
Very
these,
nice.
yeah, these two talks we have lined up. Uh, and then I once again thank the viewer and thank Bulu uncle. My special thank to Gustav to make this happen, because the technological side was taken care of by him.
Yes,
And I also extend my greeting on the Festival of Lights, Deepavali, to all. May the may you become light yourself, as the quote from Buddha. Be the light to yourself. Apo
beautiful,
Dipo Bhava. So with
beautiful.
that, yeah, with that, I would like to end the program. Jai
Thank
Hind,
you very
Jai
much.
Bharat, Namaste Bulunga.
Yeah.